The grain sacks were heavy, and Rowan Hartle's back was already telling him about it before the sun had fully cleared the hills. He came into Crossfin the way he always did, through the south road, cart wheels grinding over the old stone path, his horse Mallet walking slow and steady like he had all the patience in the world. Rowan had 24 sacks of barley and a crate of dried beans to sell. He had a short list of things to buy. He planned to be home before dark. The Crossfin market was loud even at this hour. Stalls were going up, crates being dragged across the ground, vendors arguing over spots they had been arguing over for years. The smell hit first: roasting grain, animal dung, metal oil, something sweet from the Thuan spice corner, and underneath all of it the dry, dusty smell of a place that never quite cooled down. Rowan guided Mallet through the gate and found his usual spot near Gret's stall. He tied the horse, gave him some water from the bucket he kept under the cart, and started unloading. Gret was already behind his table, sorting through a box of small parts, tools, fittings, things that had no clear name. He was a wide man with a gray beard and an honest face that had never once helped him in a negotiation. "You're late," Gret said, without looking up. "I'm on time," Rowan said. "You're just early." Same result. Rowan stacked the barley sacks against the cart and stretched his spine until it made a sound that satisfied him. He looked out over the market. Same as always. Thuan traders in their pale robes moving between stalls with their long fingers wrapped around scrolls. A pair of VYR merchants, dragon-kind, copper and gold-scaled, walking upright and tall, talking to a fabric vendor on the far end. Humans scattered everywhere in between, doing most of the lifting. Then he saw it. Near the eastern gate, beside the stone post that held the market's registration board, there was a small creature sitting on the ground. It was a dragon hatchling. VYR, like the merchants across the market, but small, about the size of a large dog, maybe smaller. Its scales were copper, bright and new-looking, the way young scales always are before weather and time dulls them. Its tail was wrapped neatly around its feet. Its eyes were open and fixed on something across the market. Rowan looked at it for a moment, then looked around to see who was with it. Nobody was with it. People walked past it. A Thuan clerk in a white robe stepped around it without slowing. Two human boys ran past chasing each other and did not even glance at it. A VYR merchant walked within 10 feet of it on his way out of the gate and did not stop, did not look, did not acknowledge it in any way. Rowan turned back to Gret. "That hatchling over by the east gate. How long has it been there?" Gret looked up, squinted. "Oh, that. Since before I set up. So, at least 2 hours. Maybe more. Where's its mother?" "No idea. Figured it belonged to one of the VYR traders inside." They walked right past it. Gret shrugged. "Not my dragon." Rowan looked back at the hatchling. It had not moved. It was not whining or scratching at the ground or doing any of the things a frightened animal does. It was simply sitting, completely still, staring across the market with an intensity that seemed too deliberate for something so small. He followed its line of sight. Across the market, halfway down the main row, there was a stall that was shut. The front boards were up, the lock was on, and a Thuan administrative notice had been pinned to the front board. A yellow strip of paper with black text that Rowan could not read from here, but recognized the look of. It was the kind of notice that meant something official had happened and the stall owner was not going to like it. The hatchling was staring at that stall. Rowan finished unloading his cart. He talked price with 2 buyers, settled on numbers that were fair enough, and handed over his barley. He tucked the coins into his belt pouch. Then he took out his lunch, bread, dried meat, a piece of hard cheese, and walked across the market toward the east gate. He stopped about 6 feet from the hatchling and sat down on the low wall beside the gate post. The hatchling looked at him. Rowan broke off a piece of bread and held it out, not pushing it forward, just offering it. A thing he would do with any cautious animal. The hatchling looked at the bread. Then it looked back at the shuttered stall. It did not take the food. Rowan ate the bread himself. He sat there for a while, eating his lunch slowly, not staring at the creature, just being near it the way you sit near something you want to understand without startling it. After a few minutes, the hatchling shifted, just slightly. Its body turned a few degrees toward him. It was not much, but Rowan noticed it. He had spent 30 years reading animals, reading the difference between a cow that was sick and a cow that was scared, between a dog that was aggressive and a dog that was in pain. He had learned to watch without reacting, to be present without being a threat. This hatchling was not lost. It was not wandering. It knew exactly where it was and exactly where it was looking. It was waiting for someone who was supposed to be behind that locked stall door. And whatever had locked that door was the reason this small creature had been sitting alone in the heat since before sunrise, refusing food, refusing to move, just waiting. Rowan finished his lunch. He put the cloth back in his pocket. He looked at the yellow notice on the stall across the market. Then he stood up, brushed the crumbs off his knee, and went to find out what that notice said. The yellow notice on the stall door was written in 3 languages. Rowan could read one of them. It said the stall had been placed under administrative review by the Crossfin Trade Registry, pending resolution of a debt claim. All goods inside were considered frozen. The stall holder had been formally notified. The notice was dated 2 days ago. Rowan read it twice. Then he looked at the lock on the door. It was a registry lock, heavy, bronze, with the Thuan seal pressed into the side. Nobody was getting through that without the registry's key. He looked back across the market. The hatchling was still at the east gate, still sitting, still watching. He went to find the registry office. It was at the back of the market, tucked between a water station and a storage yard. A small building with a low ceiling and a long desk, and behind the desk a Thuan clerk named Civil, who had the long pale face and careful eyes of a man who had spent his whole life deciding what counted as a proper request. Rowan asked about the stall. Stall 41, the shut one on the main row. Civil looked at his records. He confirmed the stall was under review. The holder was a VYR trader. Debt claim filed by a supply company. Standard process. He said all of this in a flat tone that suggested he had said it many times. Rowan asked where the stall holder was. Civil said that was not information the registry tracked. Rowan asked if anyone had seen the stall holder in the past 2 days. Civil said that was not the registry's concern. Rowan asked about the hatchling at the east gate. He said it had been there since before sunrise, alone, and that the stall it was watching belonged to a VYR trader who had not been seen in 2 days. Civil looked at Rowan the way office workers look at farmers who come in with problems that are not on the form. He said the welfare of VYR Young was a matter for VYR authorities. He said the proper VYR diplomatic channel had been notified the previous morning, as required by interspecies protocol. He said the matter was in process. Rowan asked when the VYR authorities were expected to respond. Civil checked a different record. He was quiet for a moment. He said there had been no reply yet. Rowan said nothing to that. He thanked Civil and left. He stood outside the registry building for a moment and looked at the market around him. Everyone was doing what they always did. Buying, selling, moving, ignoring. The ordinary machinery of a trading day, grinding along. Nobody was thinking about a copper-scaled hatchling sitting in the heat by the east gate. Nobody was thinking about a locked stall with a yellow notice on it. These things were in a category of problems that belonged to someone else. And in a place like Crossfin, that category was where things went to be forgotten. He walked back to Gret's stall. That stall on the main row, he said. Stall 41. Do you know anything about the trader who runs it? Gret thought about it. VYR woman. Sells rare goods, old things, found things, small items from off-world. Comes here every few months. Quiet. Pays on time from what I heard. What? She's been missing 2 days. Gret raised his eyebrows. Missing. Not seen. The registry locked her stall for a debt claim. VYR authorities were told yesterday morning and haven't come. And her hatchling has been sitting at the east gate since before you opened. Gret was quiet for a moment. Then he said, well, someone will sort it. Who? Gret had no answer for that. Finn arrived at the market around midday, coming up the south road on her old bicycle with a bag over her shoulder. She was 16, Rowan's daughter, and she had her mother's habit of arriving exactly when she decided to, and not a moment sooner. She had finished her morning work on the farm and ridden in to pick up the supplies Rowan had listed for her. She spotted her father standing near the east gate and walked her bicycle over. She saw the hatchling at the same time she reached Rowan. She stopped. Her eyes went wide in the way they did when she was trying very hard not to show how interested she was. Is that a VYR hatchling? She said. Yes. Why is it just sitting there? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Finn leaned her bicycle against the gate post and crouched down to look at the hatchling properly. She did not try to touch it. She just looked. The hatchling looked back at her with steady copper eyes. It doesn't look scared, she said. It looks like it's waiting. It is waiting. For what? That stall over there. The shut one. Rowan told her what he knew. The locked stall. The missing trader. The VYR authorities who had been told and had not come. He told her the hatchling had been here since before sunrise and had refused bread. Fen listened. Then she looked at the hatchling again, and then she looked at the stall, and then she did what Rowan had not thought to do. She looked at the alley. There was a narrow alley running behind the main row of stalls. It was the kind of space that existed in every market, too tight to use for much, just wide enough for deliveries and maintenance. The back of stall 41 faced into that alley. Its eyes keep moving, Fen said quietly. It's not just looking at the front door. It keeps looking left, toward the back. Rowan looked. The hatchling's gaze was shifting, front of the stall, then left, then front again. A slow, tired repetition, like something that had been doing the same small movement for a very long time. Rowan looked at the alley entrance. Then he looked at Fen. Come on, he said. The alley behind the main row smelled like old stone and standing water. It was narrow enough that Rowan had to angle his shoulders to move comfortably, and the walls on both sides were close and dark even in the middle of the day. Delivery doors lined the back of each stall, small wooden doors with iron handles, most of them locked, some of them so old they had swollen into their frames and probably had not opened in years. The back of stall 41 was different. There was a storage door there, low and heavy, made of iron-banded wood. It was shut, but at the bottom of the door, in the thin gap between wood and ground, there was a dark stain spread across the stone. Rowan stopped when he saw it. He had seen enough of life on a farm to know what dried blood looked like. It was old enough to have gone dark and flat, but not so old that the edges had fully faded. He crouched down and put his hand near the gap without touching it. There was no smell of rot. Whatever had happened here had not been long enough ago for that. He stood and put his hand on the door handle. He pulled. The door did not open. He tried pushing. Still nothing. It was locked from the inside. Fen was standing behind him. She had gone quiet when she saw the stain and had not said a word since. She was looking at it with the kind of stillness that meant she was thinking hard and fast. Someone locked themselves in, she said. Rowan knocked on the door. 3 times, firm but not hard. Nothing. He knocked again. Hello, he said, loud enough to carry through the wood. My name is Rowan Hartle. I'm a farmer. I'm not from the registry, and I'm not here about the debt. I'm here because your hatchling has been sitting at the east gate since before sunrise. Silence. Then, from behind the door, a sound. Low and strained. Something between a breath and a word. Rowan put his shoulder against the door and pushed. It was solid. He looked at the hinges. Old iron, mounted on the outside of the frame. He looked at Fen. Get Gret, he said. Tell him to bring his bar. Fen was already moving. Gret came with an iron pry bar and the look of a man who had decided to stop asking questions and just be useful. Between the two of them, Gret on the bar, Rowan holding the frame steady, the old hinges gave in less than a minute. The door swung sideways on its lock, hanging crooked, and Rowan pulled it fully open. Inside, against the back wall of a narrow storage space, was a VYR female. She was large, as VYR were, with deep copper scales that had gone dull with dust and dried blood. She was curled on the stone floor with her wings pressed flat and one foreleg held awkwardly against her side. Her eyes were closed, but when the light from the alley hit her face they opened, slow and heavy, like someone fighting through deep water to reach the surface. She saw Rowan. She moved, or tried to. Her body tensed and she pulled back against the wall, a sound coming from her throat that was low and warning. The sound a large animal makes when it is cornered and frightened and still dangerous even broken. Rowan did not flinch. He did not step back. He lowered himself to one knee so he was not standing over her. He put both hands open and flat on his thighs where she could see them. He spoke in a calm and level voice, the same voice he used with frightened livestock, the same voice he had used at the east gate with her hatchling. You don't have to move, he said. Stay still. I'm not going to touch you. I just want to see how bad it is. Her eyes moved over him, weighing, assessing. The warning sound faded, but her body stayed tight. He looked at her injuries without moving closer. The wound at her side was deep. Someone had hit her with something heavy and sharp, the kind of damage that came from a blade or a tool used as a weapon. She had lost a lot of blood. The fact that she had made it to this storage room and locked herself inside was a remarkable thing. The fact that she was still conscious was more remarkable. Gret, Rowan said quietly. Go to the market medic. Tell them we have an injured VYR female. Serious blood loss. Stable, but needs help. Gret was already gone before he finished the sentence. Rowan stayed where he was, on one knee, hands visible, not speaking, just being there. Present, not threatening, not leaving. After a moment, something moved at the alley entrance. Small feet on stone. A rustle of scales. The hatchling came around the edge of the broken door and moved straight to its mother, pressing its small head against her neck. Something in the large VYR's body changed then. The terrible tightness in her frame eased. She made a sound, low and soft, and her head lowered to the floor. The market medic arrived within 10 minutes. He was a Thuan, young, carrying a gray kit. He looked at the VYR female on the storage room floor, and then he looked at Rowan, and then he said what Rowan had half expected. He said VYR biology was outside his treatment license. He said he could not legally administer care to a non-registered VYR patient without a VYR medical authority present or a signed consent form from a VYR guardian. Rowan looked at him for a long moment. Then he asked, very carefully, what the medic could legally do. The medic hesitated. He said that under basic emergency provisions, he could treat any patient who personally requested assistance, if the patient was conscious and capable of expressing consent. It did not matter what species the patient was. The request made it legal. Rowan looked at the VYR female. She had been watching and listening through half-closed eyes. He said to her, "Did you understand that?" Her eyes moved to him. Then, very slowly, she moved her head. A single, small nod. It was enough. The medic opened his kit. Rowan stepped out of the storage room to give them space. He stood in the alley with his back against the opposite wall. Finn came and stood beside him. Neither of them spoke for a while. Inside, the hatchling stayed pressed against its mother and did not move. 3 hours passed. Rowan spent them in the alley. He moved his cart around to the alley entrance to block off foot traffic, tied Mallet to a hook on the wall, and sat on an upturned crate. Finn went back into the market and came back with water and food. Gret brought a folding chair and then apparently decided he might as well stay too, because he sat down in it and did not leave. The medic worked steadily. He was more capable than his hesitation at the door had suggested. By the second hour, the VYR female, Dale, they had learned her name from the registration plate inside the storage room, was stable. The bleeding had been stopped. She was weak but conscious. She had not spoken yet, but her eyes tracked the room and she breathed without difficulty. The hatchling, Brix, sat beside her and did not move unless Rowan moved, at which point its eyes followed him until he settled again. Finn noticed this first. She leaned toward her father and said quietly, "It watches you." Rowan had noticed. He did not say anything about it. The VYR delegation arrived in the late afternoon. They came in from the north gate, 3 of them, walking in a line with the unhurried pace of people who were used to being the most important thing in whatever room they entered. The one in front was large, old, gray-scaled, with eyes the pale gold of old coins. He wore a long formal coat in dark cloth and carried nothing except the particular kind of weight that authority gives a person. His name, Rowan would learn, was Orvin. He was a VYR elder and the senior diplomatic representative for this region of colony worlds. Behind him was a younger VYR, lean and quick-eyed, moving with less ceremony. That one was Kale, a scout. Rowan would learn his name later too. The third was an aide of some kind who stayed near the entrance to the alley and held a scroll. Orvin swept into the narrow alley space the way large, important people sweep into rooms, taking it in quickly, assessing. He saw Dale on the floor. He saw the medic's equipment. He saw Gret and his chair. He saw Fenn. And then he saw Rowan, who was still on his upturned crate, arms resting on his knees, watching. Orvin looked at Rowan the way certain types of people look at someone they have decided is beneath the level of this conversation. He spoke first in VYR, sharp and short, directed at Dale. Then he looked around and switched to common tongue, apparently for the benefit of the humans present, though his tone made it sound more like he was reading from a document than addressing people. "Who authorized entry to this space?" he said. "Nobody," Rowan said. "The door was locked from the inside. We took the hinges off." "Who is we?" "Me and my friend Gret." Orvin looked at Gret, who nodded once from his folding chair. "On what authority?" Orvin said. Rowan thought about this for a moment. She was injured and locked in. We could hear her. So we opened the door. This is a VYR matter. Intervention by non-VYR in the affairs of VYR individuals requires. She asked the medic for help herself, Rowan said. While she was conscious. He'll tell you. The medic, who had been packing his kit and clearly hoping to leave before this conversation developed, confirmed it with a short nod. Orvin was quiet for a moment. He was not the kind of man who was often interrupted, and he handled it the way such men do, by pausing, reassembling, and continuing as though the interruption had not changed anything important. He began asking questions. What had happened to Dale? Who had been in the area? What condition she was in when found? What had been done? He directed most of these at the medic or at the air in general, not at Rowan, as though Rowan were a fixture of the alley rather than a person who had spent 3 hours in it. Rowan answered the ones directed at the air, calmly and completely. He did not add anything extra. He did not make anything into a story. He gave facts in the order they happened. Orvin's aide wrote things on the scroll. When the questions stopped, there was a moment of quiet. Then Rowan asked his. When your office was notified yesterday morning, he said, why did no one come until now? The alley went very still. Orvin looked at him directly for the first time. Really looked. Not the glance of someone categorizing. A real look. Administrative process requires, he began. It's been over 30 hours, Rowan said. There was nothing sharp in his voice. He was not angry. He spoke the way he would speak about a fence that needed fixing, a simple fact, clearly stated. Her hatchling was at the gate since before sunrise today. Maybe longer. Alone. In the heat. I don't know your process. But if something in your process meant a hatchling sat alone at a gate for 30 hours, that seems like something worth looking at. Nobody in the alley said anything. Kale, the young scout, looked at the floor. Orvin said nothing. He turned, instead, and spoke to the medic in a low tone about transport arrangements for Dale. It was not an answer, but the silence before it had been one, in its own way. The delegation moved into the storage space to see to Dale and begin the process of preparing to move her. Kale remained in the alley. He stood near the alley wall with his arms folded, looking at nothing in particular. Then a small sound, the click of claws on stone. Rowan looked down. Bricks had come out of the storage room. It walked past Orvin. It walked past Kale. It walked past Gret and his folding chair. It came to Rowan and sat down beside his boot with the quiet certainty of something that had decided and was done deciding. Orvin, coming back to the doorway, saw this. He stopped. He looked at the hatchling beside the farmer's boot. His pale gold eyes were unreadable, but something had shifted in them. Something that had not been there before. He did not speak. He went back inside. Rowan looked down at Bricks. The hatchling looked up at him. All right, Rowan said quietly. I don't know what that means. But all right. Kale did not leave with the others. When Orvin went back into the storage room, and the aide followed, and the medic finally made his exit with his kit under his arm and a visible sense of relief, the young VYR scout stayed in the alley. He stood with his back against the wall, watching Bricks where the hatchling sat beside Rowan's boot. And he had the look of someone working up to saying something he was not sure how to start. Rowan waited. He had time. Eventually Kale said, you know what that means. What the hatchling is doing. No, Rowan said. I don't. Kale was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be deciding how much to explain, and to whom, and whether it mattered. Then he looked at Rowan in a way that was different from the way Orvin had looked at him, not measuring rank or authority, just looking at a person. He said, among the VYR, hatchlings are considered pure record. That is the way our elders say it. They cannot pretend. They cannot perform courtesy. They do not yet have the language for social behavior. What they do is only what they mean. Rowan listened. When a VYR hatchling chooses to sit beside someone, not out of accident, not from being placed there, but by its own movement, by crossing a space and staying, it is called the first claim. It means the hatchling has recognized that person as safe. More than safe. It means the hatchling has decided that person is theirs. Rowan looked down at Bricks. The hatchling was looking at nothing in particular, tail wrapped around its feet, perfectly calm. Theirs, Rowan said. It is a formal thing, Kale said. In VYR law, the first claim carries weight. The one who receives it is given a legal status, named guardian of the second circle. It means the child considers you a protector, and no VYR authority, not even the mother, can override the first claim without the consent of both parties. Rowan let that settle for a moment. Both parties, he said. You and Brix. Rowan looked at the hatchling again. Brix looked back up at him with copper eyes that were steady and calm and entirely certain. This has not happened with a non-VYR before, Kale said. He said it carefully, not as an accusation, more like a man reading aloud from a record that surprised even him. Not in any history I know. Hatchlings are always with VYR. There is never a situation where, he paused. There is never supposed to be a situation where a hatchling is alone long enough to make this choice with someone outside the family. There was something in his voice when he said that. Something that was not quite guilt, but was close to it. Finn had been leaning against the opposite alley wall, listening to all of this with the careful attention she gave to things she planned to think about for a long time. Now she looked at Kale and asked, You tried to come yesterday, didn't you? Kale looked at her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I raised the concern. The senior judgment was that the notification had been filed and the situation was categorized as low urgency. Hatchlings separated from their parent for short periods are not unusual in transit situations. The expectation was that the parent would return to the registered lodging and the matter would resolve. But nobody checked if the parent had returned, Finn said. Kale said nothing. That was its own answer. Finn nodded slowly, the way she nodded when she had understood something and was deciding what to do with it. She did not push further. She was 16, but she knew when a point had already landed. Inside the storage room, there was movement. The preparation to move Dale was taking time. She was large, she was fragile, and the VYR were thorough about this kind of thing. Rowan could hear Orvin's voice, low and measured, directing. Then Dale's voice. Rowan had not heard her speak until now. It was lower than he expected, rough from 2 days of no water, but steady. She was asking Orvin something. He could not hear what. Then quiet. Then the sound of careful movement. Dale appeared at the storage room door. She had been helped to her feet, Orvin on one side, a support brace from the medic kit strapped under her other wing. She was standing, barely, but standing. Her eyes moved around the alley and found Brix immediately, and then they moved to Rowan. She looked at him for a long time. Then she asked, in careful and deliberate common tongue, Did you know what you were doing? Rowan thought about it honestly. He thought about sitting on the low wall that morning with a piece of bread. He thought about following a hatchling's gaze to a shuttered stall. He thought about taking hinges off a door in a dark alley. No, he said. I just saw a small creature sitting alone in the heat all day and figured something was wrong. Dale was quiet. The alley was quiet. Even the market noise beyond seemed to pull back for a moment. Then she said, That is why. 2 words. But the way she said them made them mean more than 2 words. Kale was looking at the ground. Orvin, standing behind Dale in the doorway, was looking at Rowan, and whatever was behind his pale gold eyes was something that had not been there when he arrived. Finn let out a long breath. Later, after Dale had been taken to the medical station and Brix had gone with her, and the VYR delegation had moved on with the careful efficiency of people closing a difficult file, Rowan found himself standing with Finn near the east gate. The market was winding down. Vendors closing up, carts pulling out, the long shadows of late afternoon crossing the stone floor. He went back to Civil's registry office. He stood at the desk and told Civil that 2 individuals had assaulted Dale 2 nights ago and robbed her stall. He said Kale had told him the VYR scout had already pulled market records and had identification on both individuals. He said he expected formal charges to be filed through the proper registry process, and he expected to hear that they had been filed, and he would be back in Crossfin in 2 weeks and would ask Rhett to check before then. Civil looked at him. Rowan waited. Civil said he would see that the file was opened. Rowan thanked him and left. Outside, Finn was waiting beside the cart. She looked at him with an expression that was somewhere between proud and deeply amused. You know what Kale told us means, she said. You're technically VYR nobility on at least 3 colony planets. I'm a farmer, Rowan said. He untied Mallet from the post and checked the cart. Finn grinned. Farmer nobility. Rowan climbed onto the cart seat. Get on. We're going home. She got on. They pulled out of Crossfin as the last stalls were closing, the market quieting behind them, the road ahead open and familiar and going the right direction. 3 weeks later, the fence on the north field was still broken and the barley in the east plot needed turning, and Mallet had developed an opinion about the new water trough that had to be addressed every single morning. Life on the farm did not pause for things that happened in markets. Rowan was out at first light every day, the same as always. He fixed what was broken. He checked what needed checking. He ate his meals at the table he had eaten at for 30 years, and slept in the same bed, and listened to the same wind come through the same gap in the barn wall that he kept meaning to seal and kept not getting to. Finn went back to her work too. School in the mornings, farm in the afternoons, reading at night by the lamp in her room. She had told the story of the Crossfin market to her two closest friends and to her teacher and, apparently, to anyone else who would stand still long enough. Rowan knew this because 3 different people had come up to him at the feed store and said things like, "Heard you had quite a day, and my daughter says you're some kind of dragon guardian now." He said it was not as interesting as it sounded, and bought his feed and went home. The document arrived on a quiet Tuesday. A VYR courier came up the road in the early afternoon while Rowan was mending a section of fence by the gate. The courier was young, formally dressed, and had the careful politeness of someone who had been given specific instructions on how to deliver something important to a human farmer. He handed Rowan a rolled document sealed with a copper mark pressed into dark wax. Then he said, in practiced common tongue, that Elder Orvin had sent formal regards, and Dale had sent her own, and that they hoped the farm was well. Then he bowed and went back to his transport at the road. Rowan opened the document at the kitchen table. Finn read it over his shoulder because she had heard the courier arrive and had come downstairs before he could stop her. The document was written in both VYR script and common tongue. It was a formal legal registration. It stated that Dale, of the VYR Colony Trader of Standing, had registered one Rowan Hartle, human, farmer, of Ardenvale Colony, as named guardian of the second circle to her hatchling bricks. It stated that this registration had been accepted by the VYR Colonial Authority under the ancient provisions of the first claim. It stated that no such registration had previously been recorded for a non-VYR individual. It also stated, in a short paragraph at the bottom that had the tone of something written with great care, that the named guardian of the second circle was entitled to certain legal recognitions under VYR law across all VYR-affiliated colony worlds. These included right of passage, right of address before VYR councils, and the formal status of protected kin. Finn read this last paragraph, looked up, and said, "Dad." "I see it," Rowan said. "This means on 14 worlds you can walk into a VYR council and speak, and they have to legally listen to you. I'm not going to any councils. But you could. I have a fence to finish." Finn stared at the document for a moment with the expression of someone who had just found something enormous and was deciding where to put it. Then she said, "Does this mean Bricks is technically?" "No," Rowan said. "I was going to say technically your ward." "I know what you were going to say. So it does mean that." Rowan rolled the document back up carefully, went to his desk in the small room off the kitchen, opened the bottom drawer, and put the document inside. He closed the drawer. He went back outside to finish the fence. He thought about Bricks while he worked. The small copper-scaled thing that had sat in the heat for an entire day because it did not know how to leave and did not know who to ask, and simply waited with all the patience its small body had. He thought about Dale locked in that dark storage room, hurt and silent, lasting on stubbornness alone. He thought about all the people who had walked past that gate and had seen a small dragon waiting and had classified it as someone else's business and moved on. He did not think badly of them. That was the honest truth. It was easy, in a busy market, to decide that the things that did not belong to you were not yours to deal with. It was a reasonable thing, a normal thing. The world worked that way and always had. He just had never quite managed to do it himself. The second message came 8 days later. This one was not VYR. It came by standard colony post, sealed in plain brown paper, addressed in handwriting that was careful and slightly uneven, as though written by someone who did not often write in common tongue. Inside was a single page. At the top was a seal Rowan did not recognize, 3 lines crossing a circle in dark blue ink. Below it, the message said, in simple and direct language, that the writers were representatives of a joint council formed by 3 species whose names Rowan did not recognize from the colony lists he knew. They had a problem. The problem required someone with specific qualities. They had been looking for the right person and had been told by multiple sources, including one VYR elder and one Thuan registry officer, that a human farmer in the Ardenvale colony might be exactly who they needed. The problem, the letter said, was a community of beings, number unknown, exact location uncertain, who had been waiting a long time for someone to notice them. And it seemed, the letter said, that Rowan Hartle had a habit of noticing things. They asked if he would be willing to talk. Rowan put the letter on the kitchen table. He sat with it for a while. He looked out the window at the north field where the fence was now fixed, at the east plot where the barley was doing well, at the road coming up from the south that Mallet walked every market day and had walked for years. Fen came in, saw the letter, and read it. She looked up at him. "Are you going to answer it?" she said. "I don't know yet," he said. The galaxy had 1,000 rules about when to act and who had the right to do so. There were forms and authorities and protocols and registered channels. There were species that had been making decisions about which problems were worth solving since before humanity had learned to build walls. None of that had made anyone stop and look at a small copper dragon waiting alone in the heat. Rowan picked up the letter. He read it again. He thought about what it meant to notice something and then choose to walk past it. He had never been very good at that. He found a piece of paper in the desk drawer, right next to the rolled VYR document. He sat down. He picked up a pen. He wrote back,